Hi, I'm Jonathan Weinberg. I just got back yesterday from Baltimore and Washington. I was at the Baltimore Pen Show, and we also me and my husband Nick took the opportunity to go see some museums. Baltimore has a fantastic museum, the Baltimore Museum of Fine Arts, that has the famous Cone collection. The Cone sisters were very good friends with the Stein family, Gertrude Stein, Michael Stein, and Leo Stein. And they collected paintings by Matisse in particular, and wonderful art from the French art, because they were in Paris at that time in the beginning of the 20th century. So the collection is wonderful things, and Rembrandt and contemporary art. There was a wonderful show of Darrell Ellis, who unfortunately is an artist who died in the early 90s of HIV/AIDS, but just did terrific self-portraits, and it's just sort of becoming well known. His work is really interesting and poignant. He's a queer artist, African American artist. Anyway, terrific. And we went into Washington too briefly, but I really had a wonderful time looking at their Botticelli Botticelli pictures and early Renaissance art, and I particularly for some reason to this time was very struck by their Rembrandt portraits, which are just spectacular. Another thing I always like in these trips is having breakfast and getting the waffles that you make. So that was another high point. We were able to get a good rate, and we were able to stay at the same hotel that had the pen show. So we could stay in the room, and I could just go down and go to the pen show for an hour or so, and I didn't have to drag Nick with me because he's not into pens the way I am. And it was just wonderful to get to meet a lot of the people that I had heard about or seen in YouTube videos, like Ian Schon of Schon Dsgn, or the big highlight for me was meeting Jonathon Brooks and getting one of his pens that he actually makes. And I asked him actually if he would tell me which was his favorite pen of the bodies that he had laid out. And this is one he chose actually a few, but this is the one that I just thought was amazing because it has this glistening quality to it, and it glitters. Actually in the light here it looks really vulgar, but it actually is kind of elegant and not vulgar at all. It's just sort of magical, I think, and it writes beautifully. He actually tuned the nib right there for me, and that was really amazing to be able to meet the person who makes the pen and to buy a pen from them. I just think that's a terrific thing. And also the show it's not like a huge car convention or something. You actually can talk to people, particularly if you come on Friday. I was there late on Friday, but actually I got there with only about an hour left in the show, and the guy who runs the show let me in for free that day because he knew I told him I was coming for the whole time, and bought 2 tickets for Saturday and Sunday, but he let me in Friday, which was, I thought, really nice. And I think it's typical fountain pen people are very nice. And also I got to see Denise and Alia and Yigit, I hope I'm pronouncing his name right, a Bagdas family. They have a stationery business called DAYartSTORE, and they sell these wonderful wax seals and notebooks and leather-bound notebooks. And also Denise and Alia run they have an Instagram site that is all devoted to science and art, and I'll have the link in my, in the description for the YouTube, but they do wonderful calligraphy and journaling. So they were there. They were actually very close. Right when you came in, they were there, as was Schon Dsgn. And I sat and talked to a lot of people who run vintage pen businesses, and I bought another pen. So it was expensive, but not too expensive. This is a safety pen, a Waterman Safety pen. So this pen is about 100. So I bought a new pen and I bought an old pen. This one's about 100 years old. And this too is a magical pen, I think. As you know, I reviewed the Noodler Boston Safety pen. This is a Waterman Safety pen, and you can see the nib goes up and down. And when it's down, it's sitting in the ink that's in the barrel. So you can use India ink in this because theoretically the nib won't dry out. You just have to remember to close the top very securely. Otherwise the ink can pour out. But this is a beautiful pen. I think it's in very nice condition. And it has a flex nib. I will review it eventually. So that was also wonderful. I got that at the very end of the show from MaD at MaD Mercantile. I had met him last year at the Boston Cambridge Pen Show, Commonwealth Pen Show, and here he was again. And he has just wonderful collection of vintage pens. And there were a lot of people there who were selling vintage pens. What was interesting, I think, about the show is this wasn't a huge show. So it was small enough so that you could talk to people and get to know them. But at the same time, there were several of the big pen companies had representatives there. So there was Pilot, for example, was there. There was people from Esterbrook. But then there were a lot of the middle-level pen companies that are, where they make their own pens. There are smaller companies, and you can actually get to know the people who make the pens. So there was Edison, and there was Franklin Christoph, and obviously Jonathon Brooks, who was just there seemingly by himself, and you could talk to him when he was not only would he show you the pens he was making, but he tuned and grind them for you and was very friendly. And it was great talking to the people at Schon Dsgn. They have their new nib, the Monarch Design nib, which is made of titanium and is one piece. So I have actually ordered one of those pens, and I will review it in detail. But what's very exciting is most of the smaller pen companies, they make the pen bodies. That's what Jonathon Brooks does, but then they use either Bach nibs or they use Jovo nibs. But in this case, Schon is Schon is designing and making his own nib. And not only is he making his own nib, it's a brand new concept. So it doesn't have an extra little piece at the point, that has to be welded onto it. And so instead, the monarch means one. The whole nib is created from titanium. So I think that's really should be encouraged. The way in which he's really rethinking a pen and making something that is really, really beautiful. Which is not to say that other people who are making beautiful pen bodies or turning pens or doing all kinds of things with pens, they are also doing a wonderful thing. As I say, because the main focus here is drawing, I'm always fascinated and emphasizing the quality of the nibs. But as I continue with this addiction, I find myself more and more sort of touched by the bodies themselves and how they work. Like for example, one of the things that is really interesting about Jonathon's pen is it's a big pen, right? But because it's entirely made of acrylic, it is amazingly light and feels just wonderful in the hand when you write with it. And that, of course, is part of the whole pleasure of drawing too. It's not just the nib, it's how the pen feels in your hand. And also, of course, I do a lot of journaling. So I just love this pen, and I love the fact that now I have a pen that the actual person who made it, and I have a connection with that. I've always sort of loved that. I like the idea of having a sort of pen that has a history. And you can have that history with a new pen, right? It doesn't have to be a vintage pen that carries with it a history. You can. That's the other really fascinating thing about collecting pens, that you can come at it from different, literally from different angles. And I kind of like all these different aspects of the collecting the new thing and the old thing, or how new pens connect in the way they're made and the traditions with older pens. I think that that's a really interesting conversation right now going on in the way that new technologies are used, but are emulating the past. They are all involved with craft, right, and design, and making something that does something beautifully. And there are many different ways to go about that process. And I think that does relate to things like painting and drawing in and of itself. They're not separate things. These are about making something well, that has kind of integrity. I think that's what we're sort of looking for, and bringing all of that together in one space, in one place where people can talk about all that. It's kind of wonderful. And then for me, the ability to sort of have the pens and to have all that going on, but then to go to a museum and see paintings and drawings, that's just an ideal way to spend a weekend, or I could probably do that for weeks if I could, but I have to come back to the real world and actually make some art. So anyway, that was my experience at the Baltimore Pen Show. I thought it was really terrific, and I think that I did okay. I didn't pay, I didn't spend thousands and thousands of dollars. So like going to, it could be like going to a casino and mortgaging your home.
8.
8 à la pompe.
9.
9 à la pompe.
You seem to be unbeatable, Mr. Bond.
No, for the moment, this sort of thing can't last.
It wasn't like that. I think I was reasonable and got away with a reasonable amount of damage, as it were, in terms of buying things. And now I'm looking forward to the next chance to go to another pen show. I guess I'm also looking forward to getting my Schon Dsgn pen and see, to have it my own. Although it was great to be able to try out the pen and to talk to Ian and Julian Smith, is the other guy who helps make the pens and was there at their table, and we had a good conversation. A shout out to Joshua Lax, who had a table right in the front where he was working on people's pens. He's a very good nibsmith, and he gave me some good advice. So thank you. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe. That's the way that keeps this thing going. And I hope maybe in the future pen show that I'll be able to see some of the people who are subscribing and watching this show.